Hi, and welcome back to Military Law Talks. So today's video is a follow-up from a previous video. So in a previous video, I explained a case where a 4-star admiral, now this is the highest ranking military member who's ever been charged with government ethics violations. So he was charged with bribery, lying, and conspiracy to commit bribery. Essentially, it was a scheme where while he was still on active duty, so he was serving as a 4-star admiral for the Navy, he was in Europe and he got together with this defense contractor. So this defense contractor, Company A, they did essentially leadership training. So they did training classes and they had previously had a contract with the Navy and done some leadership training for a unit under Admiral Burke's control. So while he's getting ready to retire, he is in negotiations with this company for employment post military retirement. Now, this can be done. There's no rules currently. There's no legislation against the ability of military members, retired military members, to go work for a defense contractor. However, depending on what contracts you worked on, that you were, the law says, personally and substantially working on while you were in the military, would potentially affect what you can do for that defense contractor later after leaving government service. And so contracts that you worked on or approved, you would have a lifetime ban for working on those contracts later for the contractor. And some different, there's different requirements depending on what you did and what you're going to go do for that contractor. There are some things that you'll have a 1 or 2 year cooling off period. There's certain things you can't do, but you can see why military, particularly very senior military members, would want jobs with defense contractors because, well, they know the business, and defense contractors want to hire military members for their Rolodex, which I used that term the other day in front of my 8-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old son, and he had no idea what I was talking about. So for those young viewers, which I don't know if I have many, but that's essentially they're like contacts. They're contacts on their phone. So a lot of defense contractors want to hire senior retired military members for the people that they know that are still in the military, that they can talk to them and potentially steer business to that contractor, right? So what Admiral Burke was accused of and then ultimately found guilty of was, while he was still in the Navy, he was engaged in talks for future employment with this company, with this defense contractor. Now, again, nothing wrong with that, but he did not disclose that to the Navy, particularly the timing. He lied about when this negotiations for post-government employment occurred. And so that was, mistake number one. Then mistake number two, when he actually asked for ethics advice and filled out the required form to say, hey, I'm seeking post-government employment. He lied about the timing of it, and he didn't recuse himself. What does that mean? So he didn't take steps to ensure that while he's engaged in talks of employment, post-government employment, he didn't remove himself from any work on the government side for that defense contractor. Instead, he actually steered contracts, and it was a sole source contract to that company, which sole sourcing already is another potential problem, right? Because it's not being bid out to multiple vendors. It's just one contractor. So he had his staff make sure to award a contract to this company, Company A, and when it was all unraveled was post-government employment. So after he had already retired, he had gotten a job with Company A, making $500,000 a year with potential bonuses, and later it was all found out. The contractors were charged, and Admiral Burke was charged in federal criminal court with a range of different federal criminal penalties. And like I said, he maintained his innocence, but he was found guilty in a 5-day jury trial, and he was recently sentenced. So let's take a look at the DOJ's press release regarding this case. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And so this is a press release from the DOJ. So it's retired Navy Admiral sentenced to 6 years. So he got 6 years in prison, which is pretty lengthy. In my many years of researching conflict of interest, these are types of cases, ethical problems, right? I taught ethics for a long time when I worked for the government. And so I would constantly be researching recent cases to use them as examples. And this is an example that I found. And so his prison sentence is actually pretty high. So in other cases that I've seen, usually maybe if they get prison a year, maybe 2, but he got 6 years, which is pretty significant. And so, and then he's also to serve 3 years of supervised release. And so that's essentially like probation post his 6-year prison term, which he won't serve all 6 years. He'll get good time. I mean, as long as he's on good behavior, he'll likely get out early. And then he's also has to pay $322,850 in restitution, which is pretty significant, and forfeiture a little over $86,000. So that's pretty significant. So added that together, that's, I mean, less than his annual salary, but I don't even think he worked for that defense contractor for a year before he was indicted. And so just more about this case. So this is a quote from Justice Janine Pirro: "Integrity, not cash, is the currency of public service. Admiral Burke rose to the pinnacle of the U.S. Navy, entrusted with leadership and honor, but instead of leading by example, he cashed in that trust, turning 4 stars into $signs and trading duty for a corporate payday," said U.S. Attorney Pirro. "Today's sentence sends a clear message. If you sell your honor and trade your influence, you'll pay the price in prison time." And so again, the article kind of goes on, it explains a little bit more about this case, that it's definitely a breach of public trust. It dishonors the values of integrity and accountability. This is a quote from a special agent in charge of the investigation, so one of the law enforcement members involved in the investigation. And to my knowledge, I believe this is the highest ranking Navy official, really, I think probably military official, to be charged with these types of crimes and to be convicted. And so this is a pretty significant case. So I definitely wanted to highlight it and explain kind of the background and what happened with that case, because my earlier video, he hadn't been sentenced yet. And so now he has been sentenced. And so it just kind of more explains the case and the facts. And so just kind of an interesting case. And like I said, pretty unprecedented that he got such a significant prison time for these allegations of essentially ethics violations. So I've done videos in the past, and I'll definitely do videos in the future explaining the ethical principles that government employees, specifically executive branch employees, have to follow. Now, Congress has different rules, right? They write their rules. And so their rules are fairly similar, but there's some significant deviations. And so, like I said, currently military members, particularly high-ranking civilian or, high-ranking military members, oftentimes go work for defense contractors. And currently there is no law against that. But depending on what you did while you're in the military will affect kind of what type of work you can do for that defense contractor when you have that post-government job. So if you're still in the military, make sure that you're seeking ethics advice from your servicing legal office to get an ethics opinion, and make sure that you are fully truthful in that document. So one of the charges that Admiral Burke was charged with was essentially false official statement, lying to the Navy, lying on that form. It's a DoD form, like a DD form, lying on that form to seek that ethical opinion. And so that was one of the basis of one of his charges, was lying on that form. So you got to be fully honest on that form. And if you disclose everything on the form and you get an ethics opinion, you can rely on that ethics opinion. It's what's called a safe harbor. So even if, as long as you were totally truthful, you gave all the information, you didn't hide anything, you can rely on that ethics opinion. And even if it's wrong, you can say that as a safe harbor, like, hey, I follow this ethics opinion. And so later you can't be held accountable for following that ethics opinion. But again, like I said, you got to be totally truthful. And I've seen several cases throughout my career where people weren't truthful on that form. Then they tried to say, well, I follow the ethics opinion. Well, you can't follow an opinion that didn't have all the facts, right? So because if you would have been fully truthful, that opinion probably would have been different. So thanks for joining me in this video. And if you like this content, please subscribe, consider sharing this video out there. If you want different content in the future, put it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.